With such casual remarks, Diablo began his counterattack, as if it were now his turn. His speed was not inferior to Feldway's. For a demon, especially a primordial, the highest rank, rewriting physical laws with magic was child's play. By moving through the air without regard for its substances, one could surpass the sound barrier without creating shockwaves. Though different in principle from teleportation, it was indeed a divine feat. And Diablo was well versed in such skills. Feldway, too, had accumulated skills over time. By utilizing them, he kept pace with Diablo's movements. Both warriors, with unyielding determination, began exchanging blows. Flowing and dancing, Diablo deflected Feldway's sword techniques. He had learned from the previous strike that blocking head-on was inefficient. He hadn't shown it, but he had sustained considerable damage. No, it was more than considerable. It was as if he had gathered all his energy to barely withstand the attack. Combined with the damage from losing his left arm earlier, he had lost over 90% of his energy. Yet, he appeared composed on the surface, a testament to Diablo's formidable ability to deceive. That Feldway couldn't see through this wasn't due to incompetence, but rather Diablo's exceptional skill. Diablo was using his ultimate skill, King of Temptation, Azazel, to carry out deception. By materializing a virtual world and applying the world of temptation, which exerts absolute authority within it, to his own body, he was rewriting information. Even if used normally, this power wouldn't work on Feldway, but by employing it in an unconventional manner, Diablo managed to effectively utilize it in combat. This kind of ingenious application is yet another aspect of Diablo's brilliance. Moreover, there was another reason. Diablo had been quietly absorbing the power of Void Collapse to replenish his lost energy. This was an extremely dangerous act, something that someone like Benimir would never attempt. Anyone who understood their own limits would recognize that the risks of failure were far too great. But Diablo was different. Even though this wasn't a labyrinth where he could simply retry if he failed, he used Feldway, an overwhelmingly powerful opponent, as a test subject to execute his terrifying plan. Magnificent. I can feel my connection with Rimuru Sama growing stronger. With an ecstatic expression, Diablo spoke these words. In a sense, he was pure. He was fully devoted to what he loved, so there was no fear or regret. He wasn't afraid of failure. In fact, he was deeply intrigued by it, and no matter the outcome, he was prepared to accept it. That's why he succeeded. Diablo circulated Void Collapse through his body, much like Zijin had done. However, simply mimicking Zijin would have resulted in certain failure, so once again, he utilized his ultimate skill. King of Temptation, Azazel. He convinced himself with absolute certainty that his body could withstand Void Collapse. This was a strategy that no ordinary person would even think of. Yet, Diablo was confident in his success. He had initially planned to test this against the Insect Lord Solanus, but he left that role to Zijin. Thanks to that, Diablo was able to observe the process of Zijin absorbing Void Collapse. Thus, Diablo understood that his theory wasn't wrong. In Zijin's case, success was only possible because of Rimuru's omnipotent cells. Diablo didn't have such a privilege, but he did possess the body given to him by Rimuru. By optimizing this body for Void Collapse, he could efficiently utilize the energy without overexerting himself. At least, that was the theory. In truth, Void Collapse was inherently an uncontrollable phenomenon. It was akin to forcibly harnessing the void that Tensura had painstakingly controlled, using it as pure energy. The essence of Void Collapse could be said to lie in the collapse of the deepest abyss of hell, or perhaps in the chaos before hell was born. It would be strange for anyone to remain unscathed after utilizing such an incredibly dangerous energy. Diablo was no exception. His body was being consumed by the void faster than it could be optimized. Yet, he calmly accepted this, using his ultimate skill. King of Temptation, Azazel, to pseudo-regenerate his body and convince himself that it was real. In this way, Diablo maintained his current state and continued to fight. This wasn't just unconventional, it was a level of madness that defied reason. But Diablo didn't let it show. To him, there was no problem at all. In fact, he was enjoying the battle. This was Diablo's true strength. In stark contrast was Feldway. If he were to bring out his true body and fight at full power, he believed wholeheartedly that no opponent could stand against him. Yet, in reality, he was struggling against Diablo. Though Feldway refused to admit it, from a third-party perspective, the battle could be described as evenly matched. Don't mess with me. How can someone like you stand up to me? Kufifufu. Surprised. Last time, I let you off because I wasn't in my true form, but today I'll keep you company until the end. Didn't I tell you? I've prepared a way to kill you. Hearing this, Feldway's resolve wavered. To Feldway, Diablo was nothing more than a pesky nuisance. Though it was an eyesore, he couldn't see enough value in it to get worked up and engage with it. Right now, the destruction of the divine tree should take precedence. Once that was achieved, the world would easily be annihilated by the hands of the world-destroying dragon, Iverge, who would likely have arrived by now through the Heavenly Passage Pavilion. If that happened, Diablo would naturally perish along with it. True to Feldway's nature of disliking waste, it wasn't unreasonable for him to think that there was no value in engaging with it here. However, as someone who aspired to be the ruler of the world, Feldway couldn't accept, no, he refused to accept, the reality that he, armed with the finest body granted by Veldanava and the strongest weapon handed down to him, was struggling against Diablo. And so, he declared, "Detestable demon, then I too shall show no mercy. Before the world is destroyed, I will personally bury you with my own hands." This was the pride that remained within Feldway. The belief that if he were to get serious, he would lose to no one. Finally, Feldway had acknowledged Diablo as a true enemy. As Diablo had intended, Feldway also got serious. Kufifufu, this is truly delightful. Diablo chuckled to himself. There was no underhanded intention, like trying to create an opening by provoking him. It was simply Diablo's characteristic selfishness. He wanted to win after allowing his enemy to unleash their full power. That was precisely why he was so troublesome. In any case, both parties were now serious, and the battle was reset. Feldway, now fully serious, began to pour all his skills into cornering Diablo. Diablo, as if he had been waiting for this, effortlessly deflected the attacks. Surprisingly, both strength and skill were evenly matched. Kufifufu. Feldway, you should be proud. You're the first to make me show this much of my hand. Tist. I never expected you to hide this much power. It's not that you're weak, it's just that you're too immature to fully utilize your strength. Diablo pointed out, with a condescending tone, that Feldway's balance between physical power and skill was lacking. Shut up. Trying to shake me wouldn't work. In contrast to Diablo's amusement, Feldway was far from pleased. He had believed there was an overwhelming gap in strength between them, akin to an adult versus a child. Yet, instead of defeating Diablo, he found himself in an evenly matched fight. This situation was nothing short of humiliating for Feldway. The skills Feldway had accumulated over the years were the pinnacle of swordsmanship and martial arts. If he unleashed them without holding back, he should have been able to defeat someone like Diablo in an instant. But it wasn't working. Diablo's predictions were precise, surpassing Feldway's own. The reason was clear. Feldway hadn't realized it, but Diablo's combat instincts had reached a godlike level. Diablo had always thrived in battles where he allowed his opponents to unleash their full power, only to surpass them. Unlike someone like Guy, who simply overpowered others with sheer strength, Diablo enjoyed the intricacies of combat, including the exchange of techniques. That was why he was so strong. Strength, skill, and even his mindset were what made Diablo truly formidable. In that moment, Diablo's claw grazed Feldway's cheek. A few drops of bright red blood stained Feldway's beautiful face. "You bastard. How dare you wound this body bestowed upon me by Veldanava-sama?" Feldway roared in fury. But Diablo remained unfazed. "Kufifufu. It seems the body I received from Rimuru-sama is simply superior to yours." Diablo casually retorted, further provoking Feldway's rage. Of course, Feldway is furious about this. Just as Diablo intended, he is gradually losing his composure. At this point, the flow of the battle is entirely in Diablo's hands. However, Diablo is not without his own concerns. While he had anticipated a prolonged battle to some extent, it remains uncertain how long his body can endure the effects of void collapse. Diablo's worship of Rimuru is pathological, and he himself is convinced that, no matter how much he pushes himself, it will be fine. This mindset is problematic, as he is essentially walking a tightrope, unsure of when he might reach his breaking point. Moreover, Diablo is provoking Feldway while overusing his own abilities. By activating Temptation World from multiple angles, he has created an overwhelmingly advantageous environment for himself. First, maintaining his physical form. If this fails, Diablo's defeat is assured. Next, the neutralization of abilities. Using his Temptation World, Diablo has rendered Feldway's abilities ineffective. This was a truly masterful move. Most abilities and skills affect a substance known as magicules. By freely manipulating magicules and rewriting the laws of the world, supernatural phenomena are brought about. This is why disrupting the surrounding magicules, as in magic interference, can hinder the activation of magic and similar abilities. However, when it comes to higher tier ultimate skills, the situation changes. These abilities do not merely interact with magicules, but can also interfere with the particles that constitute magicules, known as spiritrons, and even the smallest particles, information particles. In a sense, these abilities are godlike in nature. The abilities wielded by Feldway fall into this category, and the fact that Diablo is able to interfere with them means that Diablo is also deeply familiar with the manipulation of information particles. In other words, Diablo has used Temptation World to disrupt the information particles, thereby sealing Feldway's abilities. Even though Feldway has allocated a portion of his ability's resources to controlling Milim, it is as if all his other ultimate skills have been completely sealed. This is an extraordinary situation. It is a testament to Diablo's rare combat instincts. By sealing Feldway's strengths and leveraging his own expertise in magic and physical combat, Diablo has managed to hold his own against Feldway. Feldway is no fool. Not only does he not let Diablo manipulate him, but he quickly regains his composure and analyzes the situation with a calm perspective. And then, he realizes just how dangerously reckless Diablo's actions are. Feldway, who has discerned that the energy dwelling within Diablo is that of void, begins to doubt Diablo's sanity. That power is truly capable of destroying the world.